Okay, so to make this panoramic print ready, the problem is I have to fit this very long format into one of these pre-cut mats. So basically, what does that mean it will look like? It means it will look like this. Here's my pre-cut mat, even landscape format. Even if it's the biggest mat I can buy, which is 12 inches tall by 18 inches here, I can't fill that whole space with my panoramic because my panoramic is this kind of format. Okay, so this brings up some interesting concerns that applies to a lot of our photos. So here's my panoramic image. So how do I size it to look like this? Because that's the best I can do, because the mat proportion doesn't match. Well, one thing I can do is I can buy a custom mat. Let's see, I'll make it in green. And custom mats cost more money, but I can buy a mat that has whatever outside dimension I want and whatever window dimension I want. But you ask at the desk at an art store, and they'll cut it for you, but it will cost, more than $15 rather than the pre-cut mats, which are usually fewer than $10. So how do we format this and still make it look good? So let me go to my panoramic. I've flattened it, I've optimized it. Now I go to image size, and I want this to fit within a 12 by 18 window. So I've unchecked resample, and I'm going to make its width 18, right? Because I know the width is the limiting factor. So if I make it 18 inches wide, I have plenty of resolution, too much resolution, in fact, but my height's only 3.4 inches. So I say okay, and then I view it, and I'm going to view it not at 100%, but at print size. And that should match the actual physical dimension that it will print. So this dimension here that I'm seeing on my screen in front of me, it might be different when you're viewing this as a video, but this dimension is 3.5 inches. And I might ask myself, that's kind of small. Is that satisfying enough? And if the answer is yes, it's worth printing it even if it's only 3.5 inches tall. Then I have to ask myself, well, how would it look actually in the mat? So I go to image canvas size, and I put in 12 by 18 with an extension color of white, because that's the paper it will print on. And this is how it would look in that mat with a 12 by 18 inch opening. And that does not look so good, because I have more white space above it and below it than I actually have image. The other reason it doesn't look so good is I don't have any white space on these edges. So if I'm going to print this, my solution is actually to shrink it a little bit. So if I go to image size, I'm going to actually make it 17 inches. I say okay. And then it will actually print, in this case, on a 12 by 18 background like this. And that looks okay. But my panoramic is so long, I think if I really wanted to print it and have it look its best, I would print it with a custom mat, and I would make that mat match. So I'd have it look more like this instead. But that just costs more money. All right. Now, a lot of the times, you'll have an image that doesn't quite fill your format, and it's better to leave white around it than to just have bars of white on either side. So let me show you an example. So if I open up from my photos, let's see, maybe my portrait. And I go to my final PSD of my portrait. that I want to print. And if I want to print this, first I view it at 100%. And yeah, that looks pretty good at 100%. Okay, now I'm going to say layer flatten. And now I'm going to say image size. And I want to print this within an 11 by 14 map. So first let's see if I have the resolution. I make the width 11, and then the limiting factor is the height, because that's bigger than 14. So I make the height 14. And my resolution, is it above 240? Yes. So this is still printable. But might it look better on an 8 by 10? Yes. And that paper's cheaper and those mats are cheaper. So let me see what it looks like in an 8 by 10. So the width 8, but that's bigger than 10. So the limiting factor is the height 10. Remember, I have resample unchecked. So that will fit well within an 8 by 10 at a good resolution. But when I actually make the canvas size 8 by 10 to see what it would look like in my black mat with a canvas extension color of white, it would be really weird to mat this, because then he'd have these two white stripes on the side. So better to make it just a little bit smaller than 10. So I go to my image size and I have resample unchecked, and I make it 9, which still gives me plenty of resolution. And 6 by 9 is a very common format for cameras now. I say okay, and then when I mat it and print it, within an 8 by 10 window, it will look like this. And that looks much more satisfying. Even though the image is slightly smaller, I think this looks better than what it looked like with two stripes. All right. So if this was the image I wanted to print, I would say File. I've already flattened it. Save as. Print ready. TIFF to the desktop with my name and all the information with LZW compression. Always LZW compression with your TIFF. Then I can close these, and now I'm ready to print. And I have a nice little midterm portfolio here with 3 very diverse projects. 2 of them printing on regular letter size paper, which I can provide and not have to pay the lab for, and 1 on paper that the lab's providing. Now I just need to buy a large mat with an 11 by 14 opening and 2 standard mats with 8 by 10 openings. Where'd my portrait go? It should be in there. Sometimes we'll get upload errors. That's annoying. It might have logged me out. So make sure that they're all there before we can print. And very often all we have to do is make sure we're signed in and that it's updated. And let me try that again. This is not like PhotoBucket. You are just putting your images on there. It doesn't matter if they're PSD files or TIFF files, though we want flattened TIFF files. This is just like external memory. There we go. So now it loaded in just fine. So I've got them all. So now I'm ready to go back and print, and then I'll teach you print settings back there. This is basically how it works. When you print, you'll open up your assignment from the Dropbox folder. So the Dropbox folder is up here. You will open it, and you will see your folder within those Dropbox folders. And then we open them up in Photoshop, and we do the print settings from there. And this is what it looks like. So we've opened up our project in Photoshop. Now, we go to File, Print. This is what you'll do with me on that back computer. We get our print menu here, and the first thing we need to make sure is that we're printing onto the size paper that we wanted to. So for our Cubist project, we're printing on larger than 8.5 by 11 paper, and you can see the dimensions right there. So I have to click on Print Settings, and I have to change the paper size. And I can't do that on this computer because this isn't linked to the right printers, right? But we would change that so that it would work. Then we would change this to Photoshop manages colors instead of printer manages colors, because our version of Photoshop is newer than our printers. And we want Photoshop to handle the colors instead of the printers, right? Then we want to set a printer profile, and the one we'll always use, which is not here because I don't have that printer installed to this computer, is a specific profile that stands for Epson R1900. It's called SPR 1900, and then we want Ultra Premium Presentation Matte. No matter what paper we're printing on, that's the printer profile we want. Then we want relative colorimetric, we want black point compensation, and then here, this is why I'm showing it, we can double check the image and how it prints. So if I want to, even though I saved this to print on an 11 by 14, if I wanted to print on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, I can do that here. I can say scale to fit media. But wouldn't it be better if it was portrait format instead of landscape format? So I can switch the layout. Now, in order to have it fit on an 8.5 by 11, which doesn't mean it will fit within an 8 by 10, it has to shrink it to 72% of what it was. And it will automatically increase my resolution then. And so now my resolution is above 500, which isn't ideal, at 72%. But the problem is my image is actually bigger than 8 by 10. So that means that when I mat it in an 8 by 10 window, it would cut some off. So I'm going to uncheck this, and I'm going to put in my own width at 8. And then see what the limiting factor is, and put my own height in at 10. And then see that if I print it within 8 by 10, it will have plenty of resolution, even more than I need, and then I can print it. So if you screw up all this sizing stuff, as long as you have enough resolution, we can still fix it in printing. And then I load the paper in the printer, I get it all set, I hit print, and then I'll save my print settings. I can also save them by saying done, and then saving the file, but I'm going to cancel them because I don't want to shrink this. I want this to print the way I intended. All right, that's it.